In the early 6th century BC, the foundations of a new world order were being laid by one of the most influential rulers in history, Cyrus the Great. As he conquered the Medes, Lydians, and Neo-Babylonians, the Achaemenid Empire rose to dominance as the first global superpower. His eldest son, Cambyses II, born to Queen Cassandana of noble lineage, was not only the heir to this unprecedented empire but also the torchbearer of his father's vision. A member of the mighty Achaemenid dynasty, Cambyses inherited a title not only in blood but in destiny, one that traced back to King Achaemenes of Anshan. As a child, Cambyses grew up in a world shaped by conquests, diplomacy, and reverence for gods both Persian and foreign. The Cyrus cylinder, inscribed in Akkadian script, records the blessings of Marduk over both father and son, portraying them as divinely chosen rulers. Cambyses accompanied his father during his final military campaign against the nomadic Massagetae but was sent away before Cyrus was killed by Queen Tamiris. In 530 BC, upon his father's death, Cambyses inherited the largest empire on earth, stretching from the Indus River to the Aegean Sea. But there remained one unconquered jewel in the Near East, Egypt. Egypt at the time was ruled by Pharaoh Psamtik II, a cunning and seasoned leader of the 26th dynasty. According to the Greek historian Herodotus, Cambyses' decision to invade Egypt was driven by both political ambition and personal insult. When Cambyses requested Psamtik's daughter for marriage, the pharaoh, unwilling to send his own daughter to what he believed would be concubinage, tricked the Persian king by sending a woman named Nyctetis instead. Nyctetis, described by Herodotus as tall and beautiful, exposed the deceit upon arrival in Persia. Enraged and dishonored, Cambyses began preparations for a massive military expedition to exact revenge and fulfill his imperial destiny. Yet fate would intervene once more. Psamtik died shortly before Cambyses' invasion, and power passed to his inexperienced son Psamtik III. Cambyses, undeterred, forged ahead with strategic brilliance. He ordered the construction of 300 trireme warships, largely manned by Phoenicians, and secured alliances with Arab tribes who granted him safe passage through the desert and ensured the Persian army had sufficient water supplies. One by one, key locations like Gaza and Cyprus, then under Egyptian control, fell to Persian dominance. By 525 BC, Cambyses had gathered his forces and marched toward the northeastern gate of Egypt, the city of Pelusium. The Battle of Pelusium would become one of the most psychologically unique encounters in ancient warfare. Knowing that Egyptians revered animals such as cats, dogs, and sheep, the Persians carried these animals on their shields and drove them toward the front lines. The Egyptian soldiers, terrified of harming sacred creatures and incurring divine wrath, hesitated and eventually fled. Some Persians reportedly hurled cats at their enemies while others strapped them to their armor. This use of religious fear marked an early form of psychological warfare and led to a decisive Persian victory. Roughly 50,000 Egyptians were slain, while Persian casualties were estimated at only 7,000. Herodotus later claimed that even decades after the battle, he could walk through a field littered with skulls. Psamtik III fled to Memphis in desperation, attempting to mount a final resistance, but the Persians besieged the city and crushed the remainder of Egypt's army. With this final blow, Cambyses II achieved what no other foreign power had done before. He became the first Persian pharaoh of Egypt. Psamtik, who had ruled for only 6 months, was taken prisoner and eventually committed suicide while in Persian custody. The fall of Memphis and the capture of the pharaoh marked the end of the 26th dynasty and the beginning of a new era, Egypt's 27th dynasty under Persian rule. With Egypt subdued and its royal line extinguished, Cambyses II assumed the mantle of pharaoh, not merely as a conqueror but as a ruler who sought to integrate rather than destroy. Despite his violent entry into Egyptian history, Cambyses initially showed signs of respecting native customs. He participated in religious ceremonies and was granted royal titulary by the Egyptian priesthood, a symbolic act that legitimized his rule in the eyes of the people. As pharaoh, he wore the double crown of Upper and Lower Egypt and ensured that his inscriptions and proclamations reflected the ancient traditions of the land he now ruled. However, Greek historians, especially Herodotus, painted a darker image of Cambyses' reign. According to these accounts, Cambyses mocked Egyptian deities, looted sacred temples, and even desecrated the tombs of former kings. One especially heinous act attributed to him was the desecration of Amasis II's mummy. The body was allegedly exhumed, whipped, stabbed, and finally burned, a punishment seen as offensive in both Persian and Egyptian cultures. Burning the dead was considered sacrilegious, and this act may have been either an expression of deep-seated rage or a symbolic gesture to annihilate the legacy of a hated foe. The debate over Cambyses' sanity has persisted for centuries. Herodotus wrote that the king suffered from a mysterious condition known as the sacred disease, often interpreted as epilepsy. He argued that Cambyses' mental instability explained his erratic behavior and cruelty, stating, "It would not be at all improbable that someone who had a serious illness of the body would also suffer from an unhealthy mind." Perhaps the most haunting episode of his reign was the alleged disappearance of 50,000 Persian troops in Egypt's western desert. Cambyses, desiring to assert dominance over all oracles, dispatched an army to silence the oracle of Amun at Siwa Oasis. According to legend, a fierce sandstorm arose, engulfing the entire force and burying them alive. While this account captured the imagination of ancient and modern readers alike, most Egyptologists today consider it a myth. More likely, the army was ambushed by rebels led by a native Egyptian prince named Cambyses III, who later claimed to be pharaoh in an act of open rebellion against Persian rule. Following his victory in Egypt, Cambyses set his sights westward. His next campaign targeted the Greek-influenced region of Cyrenaica in modern-day Libya. Cyrene had been established by Greek settlers in 630 BC and blossomed into a cultural and philosophical hub known as the Athens of Africa. Its ruling monarch, King Arsacelos II, recognizing the overwhelming might of the Persian forces, surrendered without resistance. Cambyses converted Cyrene into a Persian satrapy, allowing Arsacelos to remain as a puppet king in exchange for loyalty and tribute. He also ensured the safe return of Arsacelos' sister, Princess Latys, who had been married to Amasis II and found in Egypt after the conquest. The Persian Empire, under Cambyses' hand, now extended from the eastern mountains of Iran to the western shores of Libya, encompassing peoples of many languages, religions, and traditions. Cambyses next considered an expedition against Carthage, the wealthy Phoenician colony on the North African coast. However, his Phoenician sailors, being ethnically and culturally linked to the Carthaginians, refused to wage war against their own people. Bound by principle or personal allegiance, they forced Cambyses to abandon the campaign. This moment marked a rare instance in which the king's authority was resisted. Within his own ranks, though frustrated by the refusal, Cambyses respected the sentiment of his Phoenician allies and focused his energies on internal affairs. But even as he expanded his empire and enforced control across vast lands, trouble was brewing back home in Persia. News of a rebellion in the capital region reached him while he was still in Egypt or on his return journey. The urgency to crush dissent drove Cambyses into a race against time, a race he would not finish. During the journey back to Persia, Cambyses suffered a mysterious wound to his thigh. Whether it was self-inflicted or accidental remains unknown, but the wound became infected. In June of 522 BC, after ruling for 7 years, Cambyses II died in the city of Ecbatana in Syria. His death marked the beginning of political turmoil within the Achaemenid dynasty. Cambyses had no male heir, and power passed briefly to his younger brother, Bardia, also known as Smerdis. Bardia's reign, however, was short-lived and marred by controversy. According to Darius I, a Persian nobleman and future king, the Bardia who sat on the throne was an impostor, a magus named Gaumata who had murdered the real prince. Darius, along with 6 other nobles, conspired to assassinate this usurper and succeeded in reclaiming the throne for the Achaemenid line. Darius, who claimed to be a distant cousin of Cyrus the Great, became the next ruler and went on to stabilize and expand the empire even further. While Darius achieved lasting fame, Cambyses II's legacy became more complicated. On the one hand, he was the conqueror of Egypt, the son of Cyrus, and the ruler who extended Persian dominance to the far western edge of the known world. On the other, Greek sources portrayed him as a mad tyrant, prone to violence and sacrilege. The truth likely lies somewhere in between. Cambyses was undoubtedly a brilliant military leader and strategic thinker. His use of psychological warfare at Pelusium and his diplomatic negotiations with Arab tribes demonstrated cunning and foresight. His ability to manage a multi-ethnic empire, even briefly, showed administrative promise. However, the strain of ruling such a vast territory, coupled with personal trauma, illness, and isolation, may have fueled the darker elements of his character. His actions in Egypt, whether exaggerated by Greek historians or rooted in truth, caused lasting damage to his reputation. While Egyptian priests initially welcomed him, the desecration of tombs and temples eroded goodwill. His campaign against the Siwa oracle, whether successful or not, was seen as an affront to divine order. His failure to produce an heir and the chaos that followed his death created a power vacuum that nearly shattered the empire his father had built. Yet, the fact remains that under Cambyses' leadership, the Persian Empire reached its greatest territorial extent to that point. He brought a proud and ancient civilization like Egypt under foreign rule for the first time in its history and set the precedent for future pharaohs of Persian origin. His conquest had long-lasting impacts, transforming Egypt into a satrapy, redefining its relationship with the rest of the ancient Near East, and embedding it within the web of Persian imperial politics. Despite his controversial rule, Cambyses remains one of the most enigmatic figures in ancient history, a ruler caught between glory and madness, destiny and doom. His story is one of ambition unchained, a prince who became pharaoh, and a king who would never return home. Through triumph and tragedy, Cambyses II carved his name into the annals of history, not merely as the son of Cyrus the Great, but as the force that brought Egypt to its knees and placed the Persian crown upon the double throne of the Nile.